Hello everybody, and welcome to episode 103 of Shift Viewer. Today we'll be going over Season 2 of Solo Leveling. Now, this season starts off where we ended the last one. We see as Sun Jin-woo ends up acquiring his necromancy powers. So now he can erase a bunch of enemies from the dead. So we see as, at the beginning of this season, we kind of see as he starts off, ends up going on this raid that I believe is supposed to be like C rank or something like that. And they end up going in and entering, and ultimately this raid gate ends up turning into a red gate. Now, the red gates are far more dangerous and highly increased rank than a regular blue gate. And they go in here and there's this ice realm, and they get stuck in here because once you get in a red gate, you can't escape until someone comes to help you. And I believe it was a day in there was an hour on the outside world, so you could be in there for weeks before anyone actually comes and saves you. But so they get in here, they're trying to figure out what's going on, trying to help and all that stuff. People start freaking out, and then there's these people who slowly start to deduce the powers of Jin-woo. And they kind of start to turn on him. But ultimately, these daggone ice elves end up showing up. They end up fighting the ice elves. Jin-woo goes up against the chieftain of the ice elves, and ultimately he beats him, ends up winning. But yeah, so here he got two powerful, summons. He found these two polar bears, and he summoned them, and they're very powerful. So he acquired two cool summons. But then after this, we see during this time actually as one of the Huang brothers, who was the people who betrayed Jin-woo in the first season, him and Jin-ho. Early on, the Huang brother has come to get his revenge against Jin-woo, so he comes to this red gate, and while he's here, he's hopefully going to hunt down Jin-woo. However, Yoon-ho, who is a guild leader, another S rank, comes and is like, "Yo, don't be messing with this," and ultimately he ends up going off, and they don't actually end up fighting. But yeah, also during this earlier time, we get a glimpse at who is presumably Jin-woo's dad. No, he is Jin-woo's dad, and he ends up fighting with the Huang brother. And we see that he was saved from a dungeon, and he was brought out, and now he's back in the normal world, and apparently he's Jin-woo's father, and he fights this dude and ends up winning. So we know that Jin-woo's father is an S rank, but we don't know much about him because it's an off-screen fight. But yeah, so, because, he comes and talks with them in prison, but then ultimately they end up fighting and all that. But yeah, so then kind of the next big thing is, Jin-woo ends up going into another rank. Well, actually, he ends up taking some brief time off, and he starts mining with this group of people. He ends up mining monocrystals and all that, helping around. He registers as an E rank, so they kind of underestimate him first, but then he shows that he has actually high value. But yeah, he does this so he can get access to a high-level dungeon that they are mining around. Because what they did was they sent in a bunch of A ranks. A ranks cleared the area, let them mine in that area, and then were preparing to send off ultimately to a further deep area where the actual dungeon boss was. But we see as he just minding about doing his thing. Ultimately, he gets some free time, and so he goes and runs off to the dungeon. And while he's here, he's just kind of observing. But then a S rank hunter by the name of Cha ends up coming by, CHA, and ends up coming by and noticing him, and she's like, "Yo, don't go in there." And ultimately, he doesn't end up going there at the time. But then, when the A ranks are planning to go back in and actually kill the dungeon boss, they say, "Yo, we need someone to help carry our supplies." So Jin-woo ends up volunteering so he can go in there. So they go in there, and they get absolutely decimated. But not all of them die, but they get beat very badly. And then there's a bunch of these red orcs. And ultimately, Jin-woo ends up having to go in and fight everyone. He ends up going crazy in there and ultimately ends up defeating the dungeon boss and acquiring him as a new summon, and his name is Tusk. Now, this fight was pretty cool. It wasn't anything really to write home about, but it was just a cool fight. But yeah, and one of the interesting things is Cha is a woman who holds a handkerchief over her mouth since she does not like the smell of hunters. However, when she encounters Jin-woo, she's like, "I like the smell of this hunter," so Jin-woo has something unique going on there. But yeah, after this, now we see as it is time once again to go back into the dungeon where Jin-woo acquires the items for the Elixir of Life, and to go about that and hopefully get it all done. So, goes in here, and previously he had gotten the first two ingredients of the Elixir of Life, but now he must get the final one. So he goes in here, starts progressing up the levels. He ultimately ends up running into this character by the name of Isel, and Isel or Izel or something like that. And she is an elf woman whose family had kind of got stuck in here somehow, and they reign over the area. I don't know, it wasn't really explained, and it never was pertinent to the plot really. But Jin-woo ends up discussing with her father to kind of trade her for a permit to continue along, which he ultimately gets the permit, and he continues along. And as he progresses past 90th floor and stuff like that, and Isel actually ends up coming with him just kind of to ensure that like I don't even know exactly why, but she ends up coming with him, and they end up going along. Ultimately, he gets to the 90th floor, where ultimately he is faced with a very powerful being. It's like this weird skeletal thing, and he ends up fighting it. And obviously, as per usual, Jinwoo ends up winning. And during this, not winding, but during this he also killed a dragon. And this dragon, he ultimately gets to summon, which he names Kaisal. Yeah, he doesn't name it Kaiser. He names it Kaisal. And so this was a really cool summon because I love dragons, and it was sick to see this new dragon summon. But yeah, after this, Jinwoo ends up having all the materials acquired for the elixir of life. He ends up combining them all together, and it makes 6 of them. So he runs back to the hospital and gives his mom the elixir of life, and she heals from her mana sleep, her eternal sleep. She ends up waking up, and Jinwoo has recovered his mother. So here, I really don't know, like, even after finishing the season isn't over yet, there's still more story, but, like, this was Jinwoo's big goal throughout the entire thing, and it's kind of been completed now, and I believe only, like, half of the manga has been adapted, so, like, or the webcomic, whatever it is. I don't know where it goes after this. I believe we'll probably get something new later in season 3, but I don't know. But, yeah, so we see this, and then we start focusing more on other characters. We notice as prior in season 1, I had misconstrued it. In season 1, they actually didn't go to Jeju Island. They were just scouting it. But now all of the S ranks are slowly preparing to fight at Jeju Island. We see as 15 S ranks are required to commence the 4th raid on Jeju Island. And we also get to see is Jinwoo ends up going up against some of them. He ends up going against Goto, who is one of the most powerful S ranks, and he ends up kind of winning. Also, I forgot to mention, during this we see as Jinwoo has reassessed his rank on an official level. And when he goes to do this, they put him on the thing, and his power exceeds that of anything they've really ever seen before. So he is given the new rank of S, and he becomes the, I believe, 10th ever S rank in Japan. I don't think it's in Japan. I think it's in Korea. From his land. And yeah, so we see as, due to this, he's put on watch for the Jeju Island raid, but he ultimately doesn't agree to end up going on the first boats there. So we see as all these people are preparing, and ultimately they end up going to Jeju Island. And as previously stated, Jeju Island was the island in which a dungeon break ended up happening, and they were unable to fully clear everything due to the power of the monsters there and stuff like that. But ultimately they end up going, and everything seems to be going pretty smoothly. They're clearing out the ants, their ants. This was essentially kind of like, there are a lot of similarities between Hunter x Hunter and solo leveling. Hunter x Hunter is better in my opinion, but we see things like the Hunter Association, Hunters, ants being a major antagonist, the king of the ants being a very powerful antagonist, having the king eat the queen and stuff like that, or not really eat the queen, but like work towards the queen's demise, because in this one the queen actually does get eaten by the king. But yeah, so we see this, everything plays out, and like I said, they're fighting, and the S-Ranks actually end up getting to the queen in the center of the island, and they end up killing her. But during this, we've seen as people on the outside of this area, because there's multiple groups, they're fighting multiple, doing different tasks and stuff like that. But one of the groups starts getting wiped out, like just absolutely cleared by some random thing. And then we see as it goes to a perspective of Goto and his like trio, and they end up fighting around, and ultimately the thing comes from them, and it is a very powerful black ant. This is the king that was born in a very humanoid form. And we actually get to see the birth of the king, but like it wasn't anything really spectacular or anything like that. But yeah, so we see that, and he ends up going against Goto, and he kills Goto. So like, this ant is powerful. But so after the queen is killed, before the queen was killed, actually, she released like this death cry. And then we see as the king ends up coming in and just blows past everyone and goes to the queen, starts eating her. And then he gets to town. He gets to injure, he gets to like rip and tear and doing all that stuff. And he handily wipes out like all of the S-Rank Hunters. He actually only ends up killing one, which is a newer character by the name of Byung-Yu. His actual name is Min. They call him Min. But he's a good friend to Yunho, which is one of the guild leaders with the red hair who can turn into like this Sulong form with white, like furry lion stuff. But yeah, so his power is essentially Sulong. But Min, he was a S-Rank healer. Him and Yunho had been on Jeju Island prior to this, and they had lost this mutual friend there, so they were really close. and ultimately we see as Min is killed because the king punched a hole through him. But yeah, so that's a common motif in the stuff I've been watching recently, is people getting holes punched through them. But yeah, so we see this, and then ultimately, after all this is going down, after essentially all the S ranks have been beat, we even see Choi, who's the like ultimate weapon of the land, ends up getting wiped, not wiped out, but incapacitated essentially. But yeah, so we see also Cha was there, since she's a S rank. She was the 9th of her S rank, and she was badly wounded. But yeah, so ultimately we see as after all this happens, we see as shadows start to arise, and they are Jinwoo shadows, and then he uses shadow extraction, or not shadow extraction, it's like shadow swap, something like that, to teleport to where they are, and ultimately he ends up fighting the king. This fight, it's hard to rank them. It's either, I'd say it's tied for first with the fight with Ikaris, because I'm just gonna say Beru because that's what he ends up naming the king. Beru versus Jinwoo was a crazy fight. Like, it was, I was seeing stuff in anime I've never seen before. Like, at one point he got moving so fast, like it made it believable. It's kind of like in Dragon Ball when they start moving so fast, like you can't even see them. And like the people in the story mentioned they can't see them. I felt like that because they were moving so fast across the screen. I was like, whoa, I can't even see what's going on. And it was just a really cool fight in general. Like, I mean, like I said, it used some stuff that like I've never seen in an anime fight before. So it's very unique. And heck, even if you don't have the background information, I would recommend watching the Beru and Jinwoo fight anyways, because like you don't really need the story. It's just really cool to see, and it's really cool animation, not cinematography, but like choreography and stuff like that. But yeah, so that fight ends up happening, and ultimately, as per usual, Jinwoo ends up winning. And through this, he ends up acquiring Beru as a summon, and he goes back to the S ranks, who have been kind of struggling. And here he ends up giving them all like, well, actually, this is after the fight. He ends up giving them all like flask of healing to get them all healed up and stuff like that. And he then gets over to Cha, and Cha is unable to be healed by any of his stuff. He tries the elixir of life and everything, but then he gets a good idea to extract Min's soul and resurrect him for a brief period, which Min then uses his healing power upon Cha, which ends up healing her successfully. And he then is released from his contract by Jinwoo because walked up to him and he's like, yo, Min really didn't like fighting in real life, so could you please release him so he doesn't have to fight in the afterlife? And he's like, yeah, and so he releases him. But then after that, they ultimately end up kind of getting off the island. We see as one other hunter, we see him on a boat, because not all the ants were killed, like the little ants. We see him wipe out like a big horde of ants, but it's not really important. And we see they're kind of struggling with the ants a bit as they're leaving the island, but nothing really big ever comes of that. So then we see as once Jinwoo gets back, he's talking with Go, who's the chairman of the Hunter Association, about what he plans on doing and all that. And Jinwoo reveals that he wants to create a guild, and he calls up Jinho and the teenage girl that he was watching over in the beginning of the season, because that's actually the reason why he ended up going into the lower ranked dungeon in the beginning of the season, was because he was watching over her and just helping her like train and all of that. But yeah, so they end up revealing that he's making a guild to them, and we then see as he's on his drive home, he ends up running into a B rank gate where he just goes in and wipes out a bunch of stuff, and then we kind of see just a montage of all the people after the events of like the Ant area, the Jeju Island arc, and they're just kind of talking about what they plan on doing and all that, and about how none of the hunters are yet ready to end their adventures and careers as a hunter. So yeah, that's where the season ends, and honestly, I don't know. I would say I liked season 1 of Solo Leveling more than season 2. Because season 1, there actually felt like there was some, like, I don't know, suspense in it. Because in season 1, there was multiple points where I was like, oh crap, June was about to die. But throughout all of season 2, he was just kind of really overpowered. And we didn't get many instances where it was like, oh crap, Jin Woo's going to die. And he's not going to pull something out of his butt that's like, yo, I have your anti-whatever attack. And it was built specifically to fight you and to combat this power that you have, even though I've never fight you. I mean, it wasn't like that, but like it seemed that he always had an out to not end up dying or getting like super harmed. So I wasn't a big fan of that, because I mean, now Jinwoo at the moment is starting to seem like too overpowered. So I think the best thing to do would probably be to swap to another character's perspective, because Jinwoo has kind of completed his character arc. He's went from zero to hero, literally, and he's saved his mom. He's done everything that he was set out to do. So, like, I don't believe there's much more room for his character. So I believe, hopefully, in Season 3, we get the perspective of a new character. But, I mean, we will probably still see Jinwoo because, I mean, he's established in a guild, but I don't know how much interesting stuff could come with that. So hopefully we get the perspective of a new character, but I don't know because I haven't read a web comic. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed Solo Leveling. Like, it wasn't anything, like, superb, like, crazy good, but I really enjoyed it. Like I said, it had great animation. Like, yes, people say Solo Leveling care about the animation. Yes, it does have an interesting story too, and it has interesting concepts. But it is predominantly cared by the animation. But that's not to undermine the quality of like the power system and all of that, and just learning about the world of the hunters. But yeah, I guess. Yeah, I still wasn't a big fan on the intros or outros. They're just kind of okay. They're nothing massive. But yeah, that's all there really is for Solo Leveling Season 2. It was kind of a thinner story like it was on Season 1. But like I said, I did prefer Season 1 more. I did like the action of Season 2 probably overall more because it just looked higher quality throughout. But I'd say the story and the suspense of Season 1 triumphs over that of Season 2. So I'd personally say Season 1 is my favorite season of Solo Leveling, even though there's 2 seasons already. It's my preferred season. But yeah, that's all there really is about well, that's all there really is. That's all there. That's all there really is to say. Yippee! About Solo Leveling Season 2, and that's all we have for episode 103 of Shelf Review. So thank you very much for watching.